I always wanted to be a mom. And you know how when you want something so badly, you can just visualize what that's going to be like? Well, I always thought that when I became a mom, I would be like one of those rock star moms with the stylish, messy bun that conveys chaos, but like with control. Who always wears slim-fitting pants, and whose kids, they communicate really early with sign language. I know, right? There were a lot of things in that picture, but mental illness was never one of them. Right now, an invisible mental health epidemic is raging that, if left untreated, has severe consequences for our children, parents, and ultimately, all of society. Today, I'm going to share with you one solution to this epidemic, and it's hiding in plain sight. So, a few years ago, I'm at home with my 2 girls, and it's a dreary day, not gorgeous like today. And that morning, my 3-month-old baby and my 2-year-old follow me into the kitchen, and I open the refrigerator door, and honestly, there is literally nothing in there that I can give them. It's this chilly wasteland. So I bundled them in warm coats to go to the store. But as I'm trying to tie up my daughter's shoes, my hands are shaking uncontrollably. I bundle them in their coats, and I put them in the car seat and tuck them in with their favorite blankies. I take a deep breath. My lungs are squeezing shut. My heart is racing when I get into the car, and I grip the steering wheel as tight as I can until my knuckles turn white. I pull the car into drive and begin what has become my mantra. Camille, stay on the road. Stay on the road. Camille, stay on the road. You see, on the outside, I look like any other mom. But inside, I can hear my own voice screaming, "Oh, you can end this. You can. Drive into that wall. Drive into that pole. Drive into that tree." It seems obvious now, but at the time, I simply had no idea that I had postpartum depression. But depression's kind of like that. You think you're fine, and then it creeps up on you like a thick fog, and you know, one of those like bad, low-budget zombie movies. But before you know it, you are one of those zombies trapped in a distorted version of your own life. Postpartum depression, or PPD, is depression that begins in the first year after a pregnancy. Actually, it can begin during pregnancy, and officially, it affects between 13 to 20% of women, and some men, too. But in my experience, in interviewing hundreds of women, it's more like 80% that experience it to some degree. And when a mom develops postpartum depression, it doesn't just affect her. You see, PPD strains marriages and relationships. And if mom doesn't get treatment, her kids, they're more likely to grow up and struggle with anxiety and depression themselves, have behavioral problems, even a lower IQ. But somehow, despite these far-reaching implications, we still think of this as just a women's problem. When if you scratch the surface, you all know someone whose life has been negatively impacted by postpartum depression. And some, catastrophically so, like Florence Leung, a kind, compassionate, intelligent young nurse and a mom to an 8-week-old baby boy, who in 2016 got in her car and drove away from her home alone. That night, when Florence didn't make it back home, her husband made desperate pleas to the community to look for Florence because she had been struggling with postpartum depression and anxiety. The next day, Florence was shown at a convenience store security camera footage, and it was in downtown Vancouver, and she had been buying a Gatorade and a banana. I mean, who buys that? I can tell you who. Marathon runners and moms who are so exhausted. They are just trying to grasp at something to fuel themselves so they can keep going. But hours later, Florence's car was found near the Lionsgate Bridge. The banana and the Gatorade still on the passenger seat, untouched. Florence never did make it home. In isolation, she took her life. Now, perhaps you are only aware of postpartum depression when you hear about stories like that of Florence Leung, or the equally tragic stories of mothers who are so overcome with guilt at the idea of leaving their babies behind, they take their lives too. But these women, these moms, they are not alone in their hopelessness and their despair. You see, in the first year postpartum, a woman's suicide risk goes up 70%. The number one thing most likely to kill a new mom is the one thing we don't talk about, because the leading cause of death in new mothers is suicide. The truth is that the majority of women who are struggling even right now with postpartum depression don't get any treatment at all because they are never even diagnosed. Why? We live in a world where supermoms are queens, and flashy social media blogs, they only raise the bar. Who wants to be the one to say, inside, I feel so hollow, it echoes. And I've been wearing these same milk-stained clothes for 3 days. I'll never forget when things turned for me. I'm with my husband in the car, and we're coming home from a family dinner. But on this day, tears are streaming out of the corners of my eyes. I cannot make them stop. You see, my husband and I, we've been fighting over nothing for weeks, months. My rock-solid marriage, it's crumbling like old concrete. I want so badly to say something to him, but what if he won't love me anymore? What if they take my babies from me? What if I'm insane? Finally, with nothing and everything left to lose, I turn to him and I say, I don't feel well. I think I'm sick. Then go and see a doctor. He was mad. He'd had it. The next day, alone in my minivan, all I could think about was how far away I was from that picture of that cool, perfect, happy mother, and the anguish of my failures as a wife, as a mother, as a human being. And there was this voice in my ear saying, they would probably be better off without you. I push on the brakes, I pull over my car, and I clutch my phone from my bag, and I make my fingers look up the number for maternal mental health at Women's Hospital. Because my babies, they need their mommy. When I get my appointment, I drag my husband in with me because, frankly, I'm terrified. But the psychiatrist, she says to me, she says, you have an illness. It's called postpartum depression. It's actually pretty common, and it's completely treatable. We're going to help you see the other side of this. And we talk about treatment options like medication and therapies and stuff like that. My husband, who's been sitting there, he doesn't say anything, but he reaches over and he takes my hand in his. He holds it tight, and he doesn't let go. In the car ride home, we come up with a plan for when I feel like I'm in crises and need immediate help. We called it the veto vote. I can call him home from work at any time, no questions asked. It's a veto I used twice. I gave up that picture of what I thought a perfect mom should be and embraced the messy one that I am. I remembered that before we left, the psychiatrist had said something to me, and it stuck with me. And this was ultimately the tool that made the biggest difference in my life. She said, Camille, reach out to your community of your family, your friends, your church if you have one. Reach out. And I remember at the time thinking that, oh man, I do not want to be outing myself and waving that crazy flag around, because she then said, look, you've been diagnosed with a serious illness. If this were cancer, you would rally your support, and this is no different. Reach out. So I did. I called my friends, talked to my family, joined support groups. I reached out. And from out of the fog, wonderful people, they reached back. Parents at my daughter's school brought food. My mom helped me to find someone to help with housework. And friends, wonderful friends, had my daughter over for play dates. You know, knowing that she was having a fun day when I couldn't be the mom I wanted to be was priceless. So if you are a mom or a dad who's struggling right now, reach out. You're not alone, and you're not a failure. And for the rest of us, we can help by reaching in to new parents with food, with our time, or even with just an ear to listen. And you don't even have to know the parents to reach in. I will never forget the impact of one stranger on a bad day who looked me in the eyes and said, "Hi, how are you?" Most people, they don't really look at new moms. Instead, they just ask how the baby is, which is nice. But doing this one simple act reminds a new parent that they're still a person. It creates a meaningful connection in a time of isolation. You, me, we're the community, and together we can lift the fog of postpartum depression.